The information provided by trading Forex price action to you does not constitute personal financial advice. The information provided is of a general nature only and does not take into account your individual objectives, financial situation, or needs. It should not be used, relied upon, or treated as a substitute for specific professional advice.
Hey guys, there's a midweek analysis for October 19th of 2022. Okay, we'll start off with the Euro Yen pair. Okay, this is a weekly chart. Let me run you by what's been happening on this pair for the last couple of months. So the last weekly long trade that formed was right here. And the last weekly short trade formed here about a month and a half ago. And if you recall, going strictly from the strength differential between the two, there was more long strength than short strength. And so the bias was long. Or in other words, price is likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. And that main target was hit just this week right here. Alright, so the weekly bias is again reset, and I'll be looking for another weekly short trade to form so I can again measure the strength differential between this last long trade to come up with a new weekly bias, whether long or short. Okay, so let's go ahead and review what happened with this setup. Let's go over to the 4-hour chart. Okay, so on this 4-hour chart, that weekly bias's short trade formed roughly in these areas right here. And when we measure the strength differential between the weekly short trade and the weekly long trade, there seemed to be more long strength than short strength. And so the weekly bias was long. However, the lower time frame confirmations have to confirm that higher time frame's bias. And initially, we had confirmation that that weekly bias was short, right at this level right here, with a breakout and immediate break back in. From this trend line, from this pivot to this pivot right here. Okay, so this breakout and immediate break back in confirmed normal, long strength, but price came right back down to that pivot low right here to override that normal long strength to confirm strong short strength. Okay, so at this point, because the lower time frames were showing strong signs of short strength, that confirmed this weekly bias to be short. And so we got this nice fall all the way down here. However, about 2 weeks later, price came all the way up to these levels. And right at this point right here, we got a breakout and immediate break back in. Now in this case, because it broke out and broke back in from a diagonal trend line down from this pivot to this pivot right here, this confirmed normal short strength. Okay. However, price came right back up a couple hours later, right up to that pivot high to override that normal short strength and thus creating strong long strength. And because the lower time frames were now showing strength long, that confirmed that weekly bias to be long. And if you guys recall, I was looking for a long entry because, like I was stating, this pair on the higher time frames has overarching long strength on it. And so I was willing to take a long entry with the stop loss at this pivot low right here and its main target at this pivot high. But I did not take this initial entry long because the stop loss levels was too far right here. And so I was mentioning if we could get a pullback right back to these 139 levels, giving me about a 200 pip stop loss, I'll be willing to take a long entry. Okay, so I was waiting for price to pull back even further beyond this point, but it did not. And price just went all the way up to its main target and hit its main target right here. Okay, so I did not take this long entry because I did not get enough of a pullback for a good risk reward for a long entry. Okay, so you want to remember in trading, you only want to take the best setups in terms of risk and reward, because you want to remember biases form all the time. And sometimes you get good setups and sometimes you don't. So even if you know that price will go up to this point right here before reaching this point right here, depending on the risk and reward of the setup, in the long term, it's wise not to take these. And really to cherry pick the ones that have great risk rewards. So for example, if price did pull back to these 139 levels, the risk is about 200 pips, while the reward is about 4 times that. Okay, so on this pair, I'll just be waiting for a new weekly bias to form, and I'll keep you guys updated with that. All right, let's go on to the pound yen pair. Okay, and if you're having trouble understanding what I'm talking about in terms of weekly biases and lower confirmations, please check out my forecast manual, which is an instruction manual for these forecasts that allows you to better understand these forecasts because it tells you the outline of my strategy as well as definitions for the price action jargon used on these forecasts. Okay, and you can find that link in the details section of this content. Okay, this is a weekly chart. Let me run you by the current setup I was looking at. So about a month and a half ago, there was a short trade that formed right here. And then right away, the next week, there was a long trade that formed right here. Now going strictly from the price elements that provide strength, there was more long strength than short strength. So the weekly bias was long, or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. And that main target was hit at this point right here, this week. Okay, so the weekly bias on this pair is reset. And again, I'll be waiting for a new weekly short trade to form, so I can measure the strength differential between this hypothetical new short trade and the last weekly long trade that formed right here to come up with another weekly bias, whether long or short. Okay, so let's go ahead and review what happened on this setup. Let's go over to the 4-hour chart. Okay, so on this 4-hour chart, that weekly short trade I just showed you formed in this area, and that long trade formed in this area. And going strictly from the price element of the higher time frames, there was more long strength on this long trade than short strength on this short trade. So the bias was long, or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. Now you want to remember, in price action trading, you always want to confirm these higher time frame biases with lower time frame confirmations. Or in other words, you want to see on the lower time frames the direction in which there's more strength, whether long or short. Okay, so I was waiting for that lower confirmation to form, and price came all the way up to these levels just shy of that main target right here. And price pulled back down to these levels, and all the way up to this point, there was no lower time frame confirmation. Then price came up all the way up to these levels last week, really up to a couple pips of that main target right here. However, as long as the main target is not hit, there's always the possibility that lower confirmation will form. And so I was waiting for price to perhaps pull back to this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here to make a breakout, an immediate break back in, which confirms normal long strength, but price coming right back down to that pivot low to make strong short strength, and then moreover make a V-shaped recovery at this pivot low to make extreme long strength, and confirming this weekly bias to be long so I could take a long entry. However, lower confirmation did not form and price hit its main target at this point right here. Okay, so there's two things you want to remember here. Now, number one is that in extreme markets, there are times that price moves so fast that the lower time confirmations do not form and price hits its main target. But remember, that is quite rare. And the other thing to remember is that lower time frame confirmations have 3 degrees to it. Now that's normal, strong, and extreme. Okay, and I explained those in the instruction manual as well as the price action lessons. Okay, so we'll just wait for a new weekly or a daily bias to form on this pair also, and I'll keep you guys updated with that. All right, so that's it for the midweek analysis. I hope you guys have a great rest of the week, guys. Thanks for watching. Okay, bye.